I'm Joel Ankney. I'm a lawyer who helps people buy and sell small businesses, and I'm the author of the book, Here's the Deal, Everything You Wish a Lawyer Would Tell You About Buying a Small Business. Earlier this year, I was invited to speak to the Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition class at the Columbia Business School about the legal process of buying a small business. And I'm making this video to share with you the presentation that I gave to the ETA class because I think the information is relevant for anybody who's thinking about buying or even selling a small business. All right, one of the most significant burning questions is how long will it take to close a transaction? I have had clients call me and say they want to close a transaction in a week, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 30 days. And many times they just ask me, how fast can we close? When I showed this slide to the Columbia Business School ETA class, it was the slide in the presentation that got the biggest reaction. I think people were surprised at how long it may take to close the acquisition, the purchase of a small business. I tell buyer clients to plan on needing at least 4 to 6 months to close the transaction. That's 4 to 6 months from the date on which the letter of intent is signed until the closing date. Now, this slide gives you an idea of how long it might take to do certain things. It doesn't take very long to get a letter of intent in place. Due diligence might take anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depending on what due diligence period you get in your letter of intent. Financing typically takes quite a while. If you have to go to a commercial lender to get a loan, there's a loan application process, there's an underwriting process, and then there's a loan documentation process, and then a loan closing. Drafting, reviewing, and negotiating a definitive agreement, a purchase agreement, can take a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, depending on how complex it is and how much difficulty there is during the negotiations. Drafting and reviewing and negotiating the ancillary closing documents typically doesn't take too long because you're essentially drafting those documents based on the information contained in the asset purchase agreement that you've already negotiated and finalized. Closing the transaction typically doesn't take very long because what we're doing there is collecting signatures, initiating wire transfers, and dispersing funds to pay off creditors and to pay the seller. There are a couple of factors that typically slow down a transaction. One of those factors might be the complexity of the transaction. For example, if you're a buyer and you need to do a private placement to raise some money from investors, from friends and family, you're also getting an SBA loan. You want to do some seller financing, and maybe it's not an asset purchase deal, but now it turns into an equity transaction, and you want the seller to stay on for a longer period of time after closing. All these complexities requires a lot more structure, a lot more drafting, a lot more negotiating, a lot more planning, and that can take a lot more time. So complexity of the transaction can lengthen the amount of time between letter of intent and closing. Lenders also may lengthen the amount of time needed to close a transaction. They need to go through the application process, the underwriting process, and the documentation and closing process. Many lenders have a high volume of loans that they're working on, and their loan processors are working on multiple loans at the same time, and so they just may need more time to get through your loan and to get you to closing. If you need to get consents to transfer leases or significant contracts, getting those consents can slow things down. Landlords typically don't put transfer consents at the top of their to-do lists, and they don't know the buyer typically, and so they may need time to vet the buyer, look at their credit history and their financial strength. And so when you're working with landlords and other contract parties to get consents, it's going to take a little bit more time. And finally, lawyers. Lawyers can also slow down a transaction. For example, if a seller decides to engage a large law firm to represent them in the transaction, that law firm may treat the transaction in the same manner that it treats a much larger transaction. Large law firms typically are used to working on large transactions, for example, over $100 million in purchase price or even $500 million or more in purchase price. And they have a process for doing that, and it's very complicated. And I have had an experience with many large law firms on the other side. They're wonderful lawyers, but they work a small acquisition or a small sale in much the same way they work a large transaction. For example, earlier earlier this year, I closed a transaction where the purchase price was between $15 million and $20 million. I was representing the seller in the transaction. The buyer was represented by one of the largest law firms in the world. The buyer's law firm staffed the transaction with at least 7 attorneys that I know of, and just working through the transaction with all those attorneys took a significant amount of time. The reality is that lawyers also are working on multiple deals at the same time, and depending on their workload, they may not be able to respond as quickly as you would like them to respond. In those situations, I think the best way to handle that is simply to continue to communicate with your lawyer, communicate expectations, and listen to their input on the speed of the transaction as well. Thank you for watching my presentation. If you have more questions or want to learn more about the process of buying or selling a small business, you can see my contact information here on this last slide. If you want to buy my book or listen to the audiobook, you can find the print book on Amazon and the audiobook on Audible. I also maintain a blog at my website, so if you have other questions, you might look there first to see if you can find an answer there. Thanks.